Hello everybody, thank you very much for coming along this morning to this Global Reviews webinar about the sports betting industry, and specifically we will be looking at data with regards to mobile devices and the mobile journey in the sports betting industry. Thank you very much for coming along. We have lots of people on the session this morning from lots of different places around the world, so hopefully we will have something for everybody. If you haven't participated in one of these before, basically I will talk a little bit about the methodology. I'll get to the methodology later of how we actually get the data together in terms of the insights that I'm going to be sharing with you this morning. And then at the very, very end of the session, what we will be doing is we will be taking questions that anybody might have just in terms of the different things that we covered through this morning. So, my name is Jared Farrell. I'm lead client advisor globally for Global Reviews, and I look after a number of different sports book companies around the world. And so some of the stuff, I've got a lot of experience working with clients in these areas, and then obviously I have access to the various different types of data and results and insights and findings that we have from multiple territories around the world, which I'm delighted to be able to share with you this morning. So while I have access to, at the moment, the journeys on mobile devices of 16 brands that we have tested within the last 2 months, I'm actually only really going to be looking at a number of different brands that I think there are some interesting stories coming out of. And so those brands that we're going to be talking about this morning, their logos are up on the screen in front of you at the moment. Some of the things that we're going to be talking about, I want to talk about the concept of winning and winning early when we're looking specifically at the mobile journey for punters who are looking to place a bet with a sportsbook provider. I'm going to be talking about the differences between user experience and customer experience, and essentially this concept of the PET theory, if anybody's come across that before. So on one side we have what is the ability to be able to do something, and then on the other side we have the want to do something. So we're talking about persuasion essentially. We're going to talk about the device that people are going to be conducting the research on. So some of you may have been here last month when we did a webinar around the desktop journey, and we looked at some results that we have coming from our recent desktop digital sales effectiveness study. And so in this particular one, we're talking about mobile, which is obviously paramount to what's going on in the sportsbook industry at the moment, because you are mobile first, and mobile is hugely important. The device that the person is on has massive implications from a user experience point of view and how we actually design the navigation. I'm preaching to the converted. You guys know this better than I do. So, but what the results will be able to show us and what consumers are actually telling us is that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in the area of mobile customer journeys to help people to get in and place that bet and to have that better customer experience, which will get them coming back to the same provider all of the time. Finally, what we're going to talk about as well is we're going to talk about adding a bet to the bet slip. And what more can be done in terms of supporting the customer when adding a bet to the bet slip? Because surprisingly, some of the results are actually quite low in terms of what customers are saying, the experience that they had, and what they're feeding back to us in terms of how it could potentially be improved and the pains that they actually came across. So for the data that I will be looking at this morning, we are looking at data from 2 studies which were recently completed on mobile journeys in March and April of this year. And across those 2 studies, when I say 2 studies, I'm talking about 2 different territories. I'm specifically looking at UK, Ireland, which we look at together as one, and then also Australia. And across those 2 different studies, we have 450 in-market punters who were looking to place a bet with a betting provider. We asked them to conduct research on 16 different sports betting websites, and so we have access to loads of brands and a lot of the very, very familiar names, the William Hills, the Corals, the Ladbrokes, the Paddy Powers. I have all of the results on those ones as well, but as I said, the logos on screen in front of you at the bottom are the ones that I want to focus on today. So I said I'd get into methodology in a minute, and I will. And what I'm talking about and what I'm showing you, 4 circles on a screen with not a huge amount of information on it, is really to try and get us to get back to basics in terms of getting back to what it is that the customer feels and the customer thinks about as they're moving through that journey for placing a bet or looking for a prospective company that they can actually place a bet with in the future. We know that active bettors have multiple sports betting accounts. Claim bonuses and things like that do move them around, and marketing is really important in terms of them testing out new providers all of the time. But what's the process that they go through from the consumer's viewpoint if we're walking in their shoes? Well, the first thing that they're going to do is that they're going to try and discover the various different options that are available to them, and that's going to come in lots of different ways. So either it's coming through an online search, it's coming through word of mouth, or it comes through social media. There's lots of different ways in which they can discover a new provider. And I'm not really going to go into the discover piece that much today. We do have lots of information in terms of the marketing strategies of the different sports betting companies and how they are performing in attracting people to their online journeys or their websites or the different platforms that they're using to interact with customers, native apps, things like that. What I really do want to talk about, though, is I want to talk about the consider, which is that next stage beyond the discovery stage. And consider is really about comparison, because the idea being is that in their mind they have some level of experience either with a current provider that they have, and so that sets their expectations, and they're moving around, they're looking around. The power is in their hands, it's in their device. They can quickly have a look at lots of different types of providers and consider their options and make a choice. And so consider as an actual stage in this online customer journey is really, really important if we want the customer to stay with us. And that's really what I'm going to talk about today. Just to show you what's in those two extra segments here, we've got the act stage, which I will touch on because we're talking about adding bets to the betting slip, and then we've got the relate, self-service, discoverability within the member services area, account management, transactional history, lots of that type of stuff. I'm not going to be going into that today. But essentially what I'm presenting to you on screen in front of you is an end-to-end journey for the punter. And I've mentioned that I'm really going to focus on this consider stage in this session today. So, I said the discover piece, I'm not really going to go into it, but to get the story started, the consumer's looking around. They're considering different options that are available to them. From one of the programs that we have, we look on a monthly basis at people who are in market to place a bet, and we analyze, okay, what is it that drives them to choose one provider over another? The methodology that we use for that is very unique, and I'm not going to be going into it in this particular presentation, but we do webinars where we specifically look at that particular program. But for this particular slide on screen, it's suffice to say that I have a sample size of 1,600 in-market bettors over a 12-month period that I looked at. And I said, okay, after they've gone off and they've done a search, they've looked around, they've considered their different options, we asked them a question, okay, you've educated yourself. You're aware of the different things that are available to you from the different providers. If you were choosing one final preferred provider at this point in time, what is the kind of things that drives you to actually choose one provider over another? And that's what we're looking at on screen in front of us at the moment. So we can see I've used them before and I trust this company, coming out as being the biggest, proportionately, the reasons why they're saying that they would choose one provider over another. But what I thought was interesting about this particular slide and what I really wanted to dive into is what's the role of the website in terms of actually driving that final preference. We know that there's promiscuity in the market. We know that people have more than one provider. And so how important is the website in driving consideration? Because we said that we were going to talk about consideration today. And so the website performs really two roles. The first one is that it's a direct, so it's actually directly visually appealing, or it helps them to find betting options quickly, or it makes it easy to locate the betting options for their needs. But the website also does a lot of the other elements in here which are in blue at the moment. So, you know, had the best offers and odds for my needs. How are punters learning that? Where are they getting the information from that? And it's highly likely that that's actually coming from the website. So the point that I'm raising with this particular slide, in terms of the consideration piece and that part of the funnel, we know that directly the website is very important, and indirectly very, very important in terms of continuing to build that relationship. Returning prospects, how easy is it for example, if somebody's a customer of yours, they come back to the website and they want to get back into the process really, really quickly. Or if they were looking at 3 or 4 different providers and went off to choose somebody else, had a look at you, when they do come back to look at you again, can they pick up where they left off, or do they have to continue that process again? And so those kind of things are key as we look at how important is the website in helping people to consider to choose you and not choose somebody else. So with that in mind, we're still not talking about methodology yet. We're still talking about data. We're talking about insights. In the program that I'm going to be talking through this morning with you, one of the things that we measure is consider. And we do it through a number of different stages and through a number of different tasks and using a number of different types of parts of our methodology. But from a data point of view, the first 2 steps of that consider piece is the concept of initial engagement and introducing options. So we talked about is website is visually appealing. We talked about help me find betting options quickly. So we've got 36% and 34% for the total sample. And so when I look at how the different brands in front of us, we've got Betfred, we've got BetVictor, Sky Bet, and Bet365, are doing in the desktop journey in comparison to the mobile journey, I can see that they are doing slightly better on mobile across the board. Okay, and so that's good news, because I suppose we have agreed, we've decided, the industry has decided that we're going mobile first. So we want to perform better on mobile than we do on desktop. So that's good news. But when I start to drill down into what makes up consider, then I start to understand, okay, we know that the mobile journey is more complicated to some extent, because it's a smaller screen, because navigation doesn't allow us to go as wide or as deep in terms of maybe what we can do on the desktop. We really have to rethink what we're doing when we're actually trying to do it on desktop. It isn't enough to just plonk a desktop website on a mobile website and to drive it that way. It needs to be responsive. So bearing in mind the importance of visually appealing, bearing in mind that the website helps them to find options quickly, and we're talking about the consider stage. We've got initial engagements which we measure, which is essentially in and around this concept of appeal, and we have introducing options, which is this piece around helping them to find their options quickly. And so this is when we break down the consider stage one step further, we actually start to find some pretty shocking figures. So what we're doing well across the board pretty much for most providers. Now, as I said, I've only got certain brands on screen. I have access to much, much more, but I wanted to tell a particular story. We can see that some brands are doing a really, really good job about that initial engagement, the visual appeal element, but are dropping right off when it comes to the introducing options. That ability of being able to quickly find the odds or quickly find or match the product or bet that suits my needs. So this is what I want to start off on. I want to talk about this initial engagement piece, and I want to talk about introducing options. I want to talk about where the data comes from that makes up the slide that's in front of you, and I want to demonstrate the reasons why, actually looking at the journeys, some providers are doing better than others. Okay, so bringing this slide back in again. So this slide, the reason why I brought it up is that this is actually the bedrock of everything that we do in Global Reviews. This is the funnel that we measure things through in order to understand and capture insights around the customer journey end to end from discover through to relate. So there's a bit more information on the slide as it is in front of you, but essentially the reason why I brought it in at the very beginning and the way in which I presented it was ultimately to get to this point to tell you that this is how we set things up and this is how we measure the journey. Within the online part of the website journey, we talked about consider. At the bottom of the screen in front of you, you can see that consider piece, and that is made up of initial engagements, introducing options, and facilitating decisions. On the funnel that I just showed you in the previous slide, the third step was act, and so we have channel selection, adding a bet, and registration. So these are the different stages that make up those 2 different phases. And so I said that specifically I'm going to look at initial engagement and I'm going to look at introducing options, and I'm going to do that. And I also said that specifically I'm going to be looking at adding a bet, which is in the act phase. With this particular slide, what I'm trying to show you though is that the journey is linked up, and that we do have data from all of these different steps of the journey. And so while I'm parachuting into individual components and I'm pulling out and then parachuting back maybe into the adding a bet, we have scores across all of the brands that lead us through and knit together the journey from a customer's point of view as they're moving through that. A key part of what it is that we do in Global Reviews is we benchmark. We benchmark the journey. We show who's doing well, where and why, and we do that globally, and we do it more and better than anybody else. So on screen in front of you, we're starting to see new brands that we haven't seen before. So we've got Betfred, Bet365, Sky Bet, CrownBet, Sportsbet, and Tab. CrownBet, Sportsbet, Tab are Australian brands, and the first three brands then obviously are from the UK. The ones that I'm going to focus on really, we're going to talk about BetVictor as well, which isn't on this particular screen. But what you can see is that at facilitating decisions, Tab is dropping right down. It's at 28%. What are we trying to do at facilitating decisions? If somebody has a problem and wants to get in touch with you, how easy are you making it for them to do that? So you're talking about immediate contact. You're talking about chat. You're talking about online options, offline options. You're talking about contact center facility. You're talking about simple stuff like if you have a telephone number on the screen, do you have the operational times of when your center is open so the person knows if they're going to call you that they'll be able to get somebody? Or do you go as someone like Paddy Power and you actually say, look, here's 3 different ways that you can get in touch with us, but if you get in touch with us by web chat, you'll get an answer within 5 minutes. If you get in touch with us by phone, you'll get an answer within an hour, and let the customer actually make the decision. So that's what's going on in facilitating decisions. Channel selection is they're on a mobile device, they're trying to complete the journey on a mobile device. They're concerned about the fact that they're putting in Visa card numbers with you and the fact that the sports betting companies have to be upfront with the messaging in terms of how you're going to handle that type of information, and then also things in terms of liquidity and things like that. So supporting the channel is very, very important. Registration is what it says on the tin. So that covers off the sections that I'm not going to talk about. Let's get straight into the methodology then, and then we'll come back to initial engagements. So where this data comes from, there are 4 key data streams which feed into the Global Reviews mobile sales effectiveness study. The first one is that we recruit in-market bettors, punters, to complete research on your site. And so we would recruit between 20 and 50 in-market consumers who have been screened and invited in through our relationships with third-party panel providers around the world, some of the largest third-party panel providers, Research Now, Survey Sampling International, Toluna, Panelbase. We work with a huge amount of panels. And we invite them in to participate in a number of mission-based tasks while also completing different types of questions as they're going through the journey. A customer who does research on the Tab website, for example, will not do research on any other website. That's how we maintain the integrity of the benchmark. When they come in and we ask them to complete a task, we're measuring everything that they're doing. We're looking at the success rates, we're looking at the click streams, we're looking at how quickly they were able to complete the task, and essentially the efficiency, number of clicks. We're also asking them questions before they complete a task and after they complete a task. And we're going to look at one of those in a minute in initial engagement. But essentially what we're doing is we're measuring expectation up front and then expectation up front and satisfaction after they have completed the task. They gives us lots of information in terms of their opinions of the process that they went through, and a key component of that is the voice of the customer. In most user experience research, the sample sizes that you'll get to are in and around 15, maybe 20. We go up to 50. And the reason why we do is because it gives us a huge amount more in terms of the voice of the customer. It also increases this accuracy in terms of the percentage of the number of challenges or errors or problems that people are facing as they're coming through the website. So then also we look at a customer audit. We prepare and develop a lot of 10-point scale questions where we ask customers to rate and rank different elements of the journey as they're moving through it. And so they're essentially auditing the journey themselves as well. And then finally, in 2000, when Global Reviews first started, we started with the concept of a best practice audit, which is an objective audit of a number of different websites all being measured in the same way. So essentially the concept of the benchmark. We then introduced the voice of the customer element in later towards maybe 2009, 2010, and we combined it all together into what is a layered and sophisticated methodology for this particular component that I'm showing you at the moment. The best practice audit is essentially made up of around 450 to 500 different individual criteria which are measured on a Boolean type system, so yes, no, do they have this, do they have that, and it is essentially heuristics and an audit of the features and functions which are available within a provider's website as a person is moving through the journey. Those different elements which are measured are weighted in terms of the importance to the customer based on where they are at that particular point in the journey. So for example, you can have web chat on the deposit page, or you can have web chat on the application registration page, and it may be the web chat may be more important on one than the other. So we've discovered recently enough that web chat on the deposit page is actually massively impactful and increases conversions. So the audit piece is a fundamental part of it and gives a third-party view as well, because customers, so one of the things we get asked is we talk to customers about what areas, clients would you like us to focus on in terms of the data that we have, and they say we know about the knowns. What we don't know are the unknowns, and so the unknown unknowns, if you know what I mean. And that's where the best practice audit is a key element in helping us to identify where the pains are that aren't being picked up by the customer themselves. All of the results are compiled together and then weighted in terms of importance, and then that gives us the final results. So that's the 4 different components that make up the journey that we're going to talk about today and the results that we're going to look at. Just to help understand a little bit more some of the results that we're going to look at, each of the individual stages. We're talking now again about the consider part that I showed you at the line chart earlier on. Within the consider part, I said we had initial engagement, introducing options and facilitating decisions. Each individual stage is made up of subcategories, and then those subcategories are made up of a lower level category as well, which is either made up of task effectiveness, completion, audit scores, or those customer scores in terms of opinion and expectation. We're going to be talking about initial engagement. So in initial engagement, we're measuring meets expectation and builds trust and accommodates returning customers. We're also going to be talking about introducing options, which is about learning about the event options and learning about the betting options. I'm specifically going to be focusing on learning about betting options. Learning about event options is essentially find all of the events that are in play today. And again, that's a task that everybody completes, the same task for all of the websites which are being studied. Learning about betting options is where we give them a very specific task in terms of finding the odds on a particular type of event. And so I'm going to show you the actual tasks that we used in this particular study. So, initial engagement, the first stage. The first question that we ask is, we'd like you to have a look at the home page. Don't do anything, don't navigate anywhere, and just take everything in just for a moment, look around, and then we're going to ask you a couple of questions in a minute. And the question that we ask them then is to rank the home page on each of these criteria that you see on the screen in front of you at the moment. And we ask them to rank that on a 10-point scale. So we have looks like a site that caters for me, offers a clear starting point for information I expect to find, page is uncluttered, allowing me to easily find information, displays all the information I expect to see on the home page, gave me the impression that this company could be trusted, has a visual design that is appealing, and looks like an easy website to use. And so straight away across the different brands that I've got on the radar chart in front of you, BetVictor, Bet365, Betfred, Sky Bet, Sportsbet, and CrownBet, we can see that there are dramatic things happening between the different brands in terms of who's doing well, where, and in a minute we're going to look at the why. So visual appealing. So while earlier on we had seen that Sky Bet actually had a higher score for initial engagement than they did actually at the introducing options score, and we're going to delve into that a little bit more in a minute, I can see here that Sky Bet's score is actually not that high in terms of being seen as being visually appealing. But what I can see is that Sportsbet in Australia are scored very high in terms of visual appealing. But then if I go up to the top and I looks at a website, sports betting website that would cater for me, I can see that they're dropping down and they're not scoring as well. I can see that BetVictor are doing much better there. And so what's interesting here, and this is where I'm starting to get to the point of the difference between customer experience and user experience. So on one side, there's the ability to be able to do what you want to do, but then on the other side, there's the persuasion, there's the marketing element, the value proposition of actually helping a person or persuading a person to want to do that with you. And so a perfect example of that is banner blindness, straight off. At the top of the page, how big is the advertising message? Is it taking over the whole entire page? Is it relevant? Is it meaningful? What does the value proposition actually mean? You know, why is it there? And customers pick up on that type of stuff. And so this is where we're starting to see, okay, the navigation may work, but the message may mean nothing, or it could just be seen as clutter, annoying, noise in the way. So let's have a look then at some of the different providers. So Sportsbet homepage provides the mobile capable functions and convenient login to the customer. Over on the right hand side, we've pulled out some of the key scores of the reasons why they're so high. So mobile website capability, they score very, very high. Convenience of login scores very, very high. In terms of how they're getting on. When you actually go to their page, you can swipe across the different elements that are available from the mega menu at the top. The hamburger menu also provides access to all functions and help. If I want to get into the actual live events that are available, I can do that very, very quickly by scrolling down, and they're using icons and text. They're breaking it up with icons. People scan web pages rather than read web pages, and especially on mobile devices, people want to be able to get very quickly to where they need to get to. The secure payment information and options is displayed clearly. And then the login menu is located prominently in the top of the page and top of the hamburger message menu. When I go in and I actually then want to log in, it gives me a lot of upfront information, which is important from a security point of view. So incorrect username and password, 4 login attempts and remaining. And it's surprising actually there are many sports betting companies that aren't doing this, that aren't telling you how many login attempts that you have remaining. And this is one of the criteria then in which they would get measured negatively within the actual audit. They wouldn't get scored for this, whereas others would. So if we look at Sky Bet then, we said that we know that Sky Bet essentially are doing some things well, but other things don't seem to be carrying through. The one thing that's coming from Sky Bet and the voice of the customer is that this message at the top of the screen is actually coming through as clutter. So the design isn't grabbing me. Maybe it's another website with more appealing offer, the exact same, I'd go for the other. Doesn't look trustworthy. I don't like the top banner. It feels like adverts. It is a long list which can only be navigated by scrolling. So that's the voice of the customer piece. But on the right-hand side, we have the objective audit. What are Sky Bet doing in terms of the objective audit? Well, we would mark them well in terms of the value proposition side of things, because that is coming up as something that they provide and something that they carry through on. Other things that they're doing is that they provide a link to the full desktop website. The click paths or menu changes are indicated where the user is within the hierarchy of the site. They have access to live streaming via audio. They provide a demo to demonstrate how to bet online. There's privacy information on the website. Users can choose to remember their username for future visits for returning prospects. And then the forgotten ID thing that we highlighted on the previous page, they're doing this as well. So it allows users to receive a username within a short period of time if they also then haven't actually remembered their username. If we look at Betfred, who scored really, really low on this, we can see that the reason why is that both the customers are telling us that there's too much clutter and the site's too complex, and on the audit side there's also key things that they're not doing. So too much information, too complicated. I felt the page was quite cluttered. The homepage looks cluttered, and as a non-expert I really don't understand some of the terminology. It just looks a bit complicated to me. Then on the audit, some of the key things that they're not doing, so they're not providing access to live streaming video or audio. There's no demo or similar which shows people how to bet online. There's very little and limited privacy information available on the site, and that would be a key thing in terms of importance when you're dealing with financial information. Central phone number does not have call center operating hours. It doesn't tell you how many times you need to log in, how many opportunities you have to log in and get it incorrect before there are some consequences, and then there's no link to the full website. So one of the key things then, just to wrap up this part of the section, so we saw how important visual appeal is, and we saw how important it is to people to be able to get options quickly. We're going to look at introducing options in a second, which talks about getting options quickly, but just to wrap up, the type of things that we would expect to see in terms of best practice when they're moving through that initial engagement. So the initial impression of the homepage is massively important, especially if we're trying to get them to go through the process. Anybody here who's familiar with the goal gradient effect? The longer a person spends doing something, the more likely they are to get, and the closer they get to their goal, the more likely they are to actually keep going to get there. And this is what the loyalty programs when you go to your local coffee shop are all about. Affinity with the target audience, that includes color, imagery, and font. Clear starting point based on customer needs in this place in time. Visually streamlined design, not cluttered. Visual appealing website design, and it looks like it's an easy website to use. You have to have a clear value proposition, consumer-centric language, and then elements which communicate security and privacy are absolutely very, very important. And market leaders provide tips and assistance on how to protect your companies against general threats. So that's your computer, and that's a little bit further down the line. And so understanding how your website communicates trust on first impressions is really important. And the reason why I really am hammering this is the concept on one side. I talked about pet theory, you've got the usability piece, but on the other side, the persuasion piece isn't there. And so that's what's happening in terms of the Sky Bet site. You need to have an objective audit on one side so we can measure the heuristics to see is the navigational function actually there, but then on the other side, the consumer view, are they actually happy with what they're seeing, and can they interpret the navigation so that in a consumer-friendly way that it helps them to get to where they need to get to. So that's the first piece that we were going to talk about. And so I can see that I'm at 10:30, so I'm 3/4 of the way through the presentation for anybody who's tight on time, who's just wondering, and I expect to be finishing up at about 11:15. So going through into the second piece of this, we've got introducing options, lots going on screen in front of you, and that's a good thing. And I'll tell you what is going on here is essentially the scores from the user task at introducing options. That user task was to find the odds for Gallant Oscar to win the 2016 Aintree Grand National. The icons are telling us the different types of things that we are measuring. We're measuring effectiveness, efficiency, time, and evaluation, so that's consumers' evaluation of the task, and satisfaction. And then over on the right-hand side in a separate box on its own is the audit, which is the objective audit. I've highlighted some of the areas in blue because they are the key areas I want to talk about because they're quickly telling me insights in terms of what's going on for Sky Bet in this particular instance against some of the competitors both in the UK and in Australia. So in completing the task, we could see that BetVictor, people were very successful in completing the task on the BetVictor site. We can see that for Sky Bet, the success was much, much lower. But interestingly, the confidence is high, which means that people think that they completed the task correctly, but they actually didn't complete the task correctly. So there's a signposting thing going on there in terms of knowing that they're at the right place in the journey and communicating to them where they have to go next in order to achieve success. We can see at evaluation, BetVictor scores high in evaluation, but Sky Bet and CrownBet coming in much, much lower there. And then on satisfaction, the scores are continuing. And so within this particular category and within this particular task, which was to locate betting options, we can see that BetVictor is scoring quite high, and then Sky Bet are struggling, and CrownBet also, in terms of efficiency there, we can see a greater number of clicks, and then also satisfaction not being so high. So why? One of the key things that we ask after a person has completed the task, so while we are measuring their performance as they're moving through the task, we then ask them are there any errors that they encountered while they were trying to complete that particular task. Through two key areas that I wanted to look at for these brands that we're now focusing on. Finding where to start looking was not easy, and it took a long time to find the information were two key things that are coming forward in terms of CrownBet and Sky Bet. And so I had suggested that maybe it's a signposting problem. Well, this information here in front of me is telling me that it actually, the customers are telling me, the punters themselves are telling me that there is a signposting problem. And for CrownBet, we can see that the navigation is hard to follow is also coming forward as being a key problem. Okay, so let's actually look at the particular website itself. So what we're looking at here is CrownBet. I go to the hamburger on the top left-hand corner. I scroll down to Rugby League. Then that brings me to the Rugby League page, which I then have filters. I'm going to the National Rugby League, the NRL, which gives me a drop-down. I choose the particular event that I'm looking for within National Rugby League, and that pulls up all of the various different types of events. I then scroll down to the different types of events, and then that pulls up a new page, which shows me the different types of teams. But the key thing is that the customers have to know all of the details to find the event options. I'm scrolling through it. If I don't know those event details, then I'm going to struggle to actually find what I want to place a bet on. So I did not know how to start the search is one of the comments. It was hard to find, the site just isn't clear enough, I didn't know where to look, no idea where to look, gave up, too much going on with pop-ups, I couldn't find the odds and took too long to navigate for this option. So people are struggling as they're moving through trying to complete that particular task on the CrownBet site. If I look at the actual click stream and see what's going on, we can see that it's quite wide at the beginning of it. So customers click different options such as sport, AFL and racing in order to be able to get to their event. Many people find the rugby league option, but their browsing continues to find the event and the team. So there is a signposting problem here and something that we need to do in order to be able to help people find where they want to go. Sky Bet also scored low in terms of this particular task. Let's look at the reasons why. So within the actual mobile page itself, I have the option of clicking up on the hamburger at the top, which then brings me down into the different types of sports. Or on the actual homepage itself, I can scroll down, I can look at highlighted, fed forward information about some of the key events, live events that are coming up, and within that I have view all horse racing markets. If I click on the view all horse racing markets, that brings me to the horse racing page. And then within the horse racing page, I can click down on individual events, which shows me the individual races. Again, we're in a similar situation though. The customers have to know all the details of the events to find the odds, and finding the information is not easy on the website as the list is long and text heavy. So this is when I actually go into the individual page then for Lingfield. I can see that the different horses that are racing and I can look at the bets. But the customers have to be familiar with the terminology of horse rating, meetings and anti-post. And the comments that are coming out of it is that they couldn't find a Grand National horse on the website. It was hard to find with no search function, couldn't find a horse anywhere, could not find where to go. Finding the odds would have been easy. It was finding the correct race that was the problem. I couldn't find a specific race I was looking for. Let's have a look at the clickstream for this particular one. So we've split it on the basis of two different types of journeys, two different types of websites that they were going through. Many customers visited horse racing page but couldn't find a specific race to bet, so they went back to the home page or the horse racing top page. And after all the repeated browsing, many customers still had to return to the top pages, 15% to the home page and 35% to the horse racing page. So what's coming forward and what we were finding here essentially is that the top tabs aren't helping them to filter the races to those who don't understand terminology or have any kind of difficulty in terms of knowing where to go. So possibly the customers checking the races one by one to find the specific races, they're drilling down, they're coming back up again. That gets very frustrating. They're going around and around in circle and ultimately they may abandon. So what is it that BetVictor are doing that is actually working for them? So if we look at the burger menu up in the top left-hand corner. The use of the different types of icons against the actual text is very helpful, visual cue, but then we also look at the mega menu in terms of the actual scroller across the top. We've got home, in-play, football, horse racing, and virtual. The customer can find all of the events linked for the key events in the home page. The hamburger menu is also in a simple A to Z order with icons, and the event page, the actual horse racing page itself, has easy selection titles, today's races, tomorrow's races, future races, consumer-centric language, easy to understand. So it's easy to filter races for everyone. So then I go in and I can click through the various different types of races and I can quickly get to where I need to get to. The click paths also show that customers were less confused about the actual website. So they had 25% success in the earlier path, while Sky Bet had their first success by one person in the earlier path. So there's a big difference between how quickly people are actually getting there and how quickly they're able to find what they're looking for. So the differences between them, we believe, is the event at the top page may have been the difference to the key to success. And so Sky Bet provides the next 10 bets in the top page. BetVictor provides all races by location and time in the top page. This gives extra search paths to find the future race for Sky Bet, and then on BetVictor, this enables customers to find a future race by scrolling down. On Sky Bet's side, finding the page for future races could take a while and locations are not in A to Z order, whereas on the BetVictor side, they are in A to Z order. Okay, so that's the introducing options. That's consider. People want to be able to be attracted, know that they're going to get what they need, and then be able to find their options quickly. So that was the consider stage. Now I want to quickly look at the act stage and then we'll wrap up. The ACT stage, just for reference, we talked about the different stages and there are subcategories under that. Within adding a bet, we've got the betting slip and we've got the bet slip support. You've seen this similar type of slide before. We have a task in here, so we're going to look at the evaluation and satisfaction of completing the task, which was your task is to add a £20 fourfold match result accumulator bet to the bet slip, and to add a $20 bet to the betting slip for Horse Jamaica to win the 2016 Australian Derby, because we're going to be looking at some Australian results, so the tasks were slightly different. So what we can see is Betfred are doing very, very well here in terms of the UK, people completing the task. Again, Sky Bet are a little bit lower, and then Tab are also scoring low in terms of performance in this particular one as well. So why is it that they're not doing so well? So more customers in Tab and Sky Bet websites need help to understand the process, and they found that the process was confusing. Tab and Sky Bet customers had problems finding where to start. So again, signposting is coming through as being a key problem as they're moving through this actual task. Betfred customers, they navigate to all upcoming matches and provides a simple process to add to the bet slip to select the accumulator. So I've got my sport at the top in the menu, and then when I come into my sport, I've got live and upcoming, and so it's easy and clear to find the upcoming games, and I simply click the match bet, which has now come up on the screen in front of you, and add to the bet slip. And then when I actually get to the bet slip and I go to add to the accumulator, I get prompted with a piece of information which tells me what an accumulator bet is all about. And so I don't have to actually pull the information, it is pushed to me, which is very helpful. Tab's website is hard to find the future races. So up at the top I've got featured and I've got racing. I want to click on racing, and then it brings me to the page of all the various different types of races and results and information coming up in a table format. It's difficult to read on a mobile device. It's very, very hard. There's an awful lot of information in one place, and the type of comments that we were getting out of that is I can't find the exact name match for the horse and there is no search option. The home page navigates customers directly to the racing top page via the prominent link icon at the top of the home page, but customers can't find the futures events from the top page. So if I go to the hamburger menu on the left hand side and I click on racing, then it brings me through a slightly different journey, and then it makes it easier for me to actually get to where I need to get to. So it's the hamburger menu on the left hand side which is a little bit more successful, and I still have to pick the race to bet. Too hard to find the correct race. I found the navigation difficult. Looking at Sky Bet, a similar thing is happening in terms of finding an all match list for the accumulator bet options. So the top page doesn't have any information about the accumulator bet, and if customers try to add to the slip from the top page, there are many matches and so many betting options to choose, and all the options are named technically. Don't know where to find about it, or don't know how to go about it, and I could only find football match to bet on. Initially quite difficult to get the different accumulator bet slips, as I was immediately drawn to look under football. However, I realized that there was a coupon section and it was very simple. So we're coming down to signposting. Essentially, again, people are getting there, but they're getting much later in the journey. It's taking them longer to get there to complete the actual process. So customers actually have to know what coupons tab is to find all matches linked to add multiple to the slip at once. So once slips are added, the rest of the process is simple as long as you can find the bet. And so that bringing forward then the multiples and the accumulator process as they're going through it. So really what we're suggesting here is that the top navigation bar can be used more effectively by those in Tab and by those in Sky Bet. On the Sky Bet side, there's no icons, so that scanning piece isn't as strong as it is with, say, BetVictor. And then on the Tab piece, they are using icons, but how they're then carrying through to the next page is where the challenge is. So the idea is that a person clicks on a particular signpost or a funnel, they expect that funnel is actually going to take them to where they're looking for the information. And if that doesn't happen, very quickly in a mobile device, a person becomes lost, because moving backwards and forwards in a mobile device is a little bit more difficult with the concept of vertical hierarchy and a horizontal hierarchy. So Sky Bet provides the football top page, has navigation tabs to filter matches, but the tab titles need to be clear and obvious to locate the information. Where would customers think all matches are located? The TAM homepage has a navigation which attracts customers to navigate through to the page, but it could be the trap to confuse if the link doesn't provide what they're looking for. The link to feature races in the next page would make it easier for customers. So one of the questions that was asked in a previous session, and I'm very, very close to wrapping up now, one of the questions that was asked in a previous session was A to Z versus search on mobile, and what do we think of the concept of search on mobile? Well, ultimately the answer is the best case scenario is both, but from our research we have found that search is the default option for the customer if they can't find something. A magnifying glass icon in the upper right hand corner is optimal in terms of communicating search, and mobile search that suggests options based on the first couple of letters so that you're actually predicting it for them as you're moving forward is even better. Have a look at Apple if anybody's looking for an example. A to Zs are also useful when navigating a long list of sports. They cannot replace everything search is used for, and it must contain sufficient terms. But we saw the power of the correct implementation of A to Search on the BetVictor site in comparison to some of the other sites. And then I just want to pull forward an actual quotation. A deep information architecture, often supported by cascading menus on the desktop, doesn't translate well on mobile. It often forces the user to take too many steps to reach the content. And that's ultimately the thing in mobile. They want to move quickly, they want to move fast, so you've got to reduce the number of steps that a person actually takes in order getting through the actual the process. So what's a person going to do if they encounter a problem on mobile? 27% are going to look for frequently asked questions, 24% are going to look for an online web chat feature, and then we have 22% contact us form or an email address, 18% would leave the provider and look for somebody else. And that's why we have to get this right, because essentially we are leaking customers if we are not providing a navigation and a customer experience which is optimal, or that they're going to be able to provide or find somewhere else. So my conclusions to wrap up, so it's really about driving attraction and confirming that you will meet the customer needs, communicating security and privacy, talking about, a value proposition which is relevant to them. The second step then is to allow them to quickly compare their betting options and to introduce those options and making sure that the navigation is optimal in terms of those first couple of steps of getting that done. It's critical on a mobile device. So when they're adding a bet to the betting slip, feeding forward information is critical. We talked about that. And then thinking about screen resolutions, how people scan on those particular type of pages, making it as easy as possible it is for people to see the signposts so that they don't get lost and abandoned. And then consider the implementation of search and A to Z at the same time, because the default position is if they don't know what they're looking for, they would like a search feature with predictive coming up first. So what I've talked about is really an overview. We have loads of brands that we have insights on. We have it across multiple different territories. We also have a casino program as well, and that's if something you're interested in, you can get in touch with us about that as well. But I've really only given you a top-level view of the key information that's coming through it. You saw the journey yourself. There are 6 different stages between the consider and the act. I've only really parachuted into a couple of them. I've only really looked at a couple of brands. And so if you would like to know more, if you would like to get involved in terms of the program, the type of things that you will get access to that we didn't go through today is the full research. All of our results are distributed through our proprietary portal, which is an on-demand system where you can have multiple logins for your team, and you'll be able to go actually in and cut and analyze the data itself, see the verbatim, see how you're doing against your competitors, and essentially analyzing the results in terms of that journey. Other than that, then, the team that I work with, which is the client advisory team, we will work with you to understand the consumer insights, look at best practice, make recommendations, and then measure and benchmark going forward over time. We run the mobile sales effectiveness program biannually, so every 6 months, and so after each data run we will come in and talk to you, but we are very much open to talk to you at any particular time during the year when you're part of the program and you're a client. And so we look at wireframes. There are lots of various different things that we do in terms of helping to evolve your journey, but a key element then obviously is when the data comes out and it's ready, we sit down, we understand what your business needs, and we work with you to improve the journey for the customer and drive higher conversions. So if you'd like to talk to us about the 2016 program, please do get in touch. I hope that you have enjoyed the webinar this morning. What I will do is, just in case we have any questions at all, I'll mute my microphone just for a moment, see if there are any questions, and then I'll come back on, handle the questions, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, so we've got one particular question there, which is more about the date range and the localization of the studies. So hopefully I understand answer the question correctly, and I'll give you my best answer around that. So the actual date range for the studies, these particular studies here are April, and so the length of field work, the time that we are in field for that research, could be anywhere between 2 weeks and 3 weeks, dependent on the number of brands in an individual territory that we are measuring. So for example, it may be that you're measuring 10 brands in the UK and you're measuring 6 brands in Australia. So obviously that's going to impact the length of time it's going to take to do the field work, because there are more brands being measured in the UK. Now they're just indicative figures, just to give you an idea of how it works. So the field work then itself happens over a longer period of time. So then in terms of how we're actually recruiting and managing and working with the people who are conducting the research, how we're localizing it, is essentially the reason why we work with the largest panel providers around the world is that we regularly open up new markets. So we work in lots of various different industries, and we draw learnings from those industries to feed into the sports betting industry. So for example, we work in banking. They're very good at security and privacy, and we take learnings from best practice in there, and we make recommendations to clients from evidence-led, from our programs, what's working in banking that could be applicable to sports betting. So when we're opening up a market, it's important for us then to be able to work with a panel partner who has access to large panels that we can screen and capture in-market people in that marketplace who can conduct and participate in research with global reviews. So what we do is every data run, what we do is we go out and working with our panel partners, we will invite a number of people in to conduct the research, and we will screen them on the basis of, in particular in this particular industry, we have a quota control on male versus female because we know that there's a male skew in this industry, and we'll also quota control on the basis of how active a bettor they are, and how recently they placed a bet online, and also then how soon into the future they're going to place a bet. And so we do quota control on that basis as well. And so in each individual territory, the person who's participating in the research will participate in research on a website in their own territory. So the idea being that the people in the UK are not doing user experience and not answering questions and giving their opinions and expectations on CrownBet or Sportsbet, for example. The research is localized for the person who's conducting participating in the research is answering questions about the brand to which the country in which they live. So it's all, because that obviously will have a massive impact in terms of the relevancy of the information, relevancy of the website, and even the relationship to it, and maybe it's a website that they used previously before in the past. So hopefully, I've answered the question. If not, please do get in touch, and the person who posed the question, and I can give you further details. I suppose the final bit that I would add is, because we have a large number of people who are coming in and doing research on the different journeys, what we do and the scale we do it at is much bigger than anybody else. So that idea being, in this one particular study, if you have 10 brands that you are actually 10 journeys that you are measuring, and you have individual people doing it on one website and not on another, you're starting to get up to sample sizes of around 500 for each individual study that we might be running. And so you can do both quantitative and qualitative analysis as you're actually moving through that. And so we can drill down to the user experience stuff, but we can also pull back to understand what is it that's important to them as they're actually looking for a sports betting provider in the industry. And so behavioral stuff becomes important too. And so it's a great value add that we have in our studies. So hopefully that answers the question. Thank you very much again for coming along. And if you have any, just one more other question, are panels paid? So the panels, it's all, what we do is standard market research in terms of how we would operate with the panels. So the panels are incentivized, but it's a slightly different question because it's outside of the program, but in terms of how panels operate, they would be incentivized by points. They would have a ceiling. They would be able to, they'd have to conduct a number of pieces of research to be able to redeem those points. But those pieces of research that they're conducting will not be with just global reviews. They'll be working with other people as well. But the panels that we work with and the panel providers we work with, everything's done in line with best practice, and people are only only allowed to complete a certain amount of pieces of research on a monthly basis so that they don't turn into research professionals. And so everything's done in line with ESOMAR best practice. So please do get in touch if you have any more questions, and thank you very much for coming along, and I hope you found the event and the session very useful.